Okay, so I'm Nathaniel. Today, as you already know from my teacher, I'm going to be like your narrator for today. So we're going to talk to you, my class, about 7th generation thinking. And this is to demonstrate like a method of inquiry or a questioning method. We have 4 different types of questions: robot, detective, judge, and inventor. So first, robot will be presenting. What you need to remember is that robot finds the facts: who, what, where, and when, just not why and how. So they're going to be coming on now. Think as if you're a robot.
Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the 7th generation principle.
Et aujourd'hui, nous parlons à propos du principe de la 7e génération.
We will ask 4 different questions: who, what, where, and when. These are robot questions.
Nous demandons 4 questions. Qui, qu'est-ce que, où et quand. Ça, c'est des questions robot.
Robot questions are questions that answer hard, one-sided facts that cannot be argued or reasoned with.
Les questions robots sont les questions qui demandent les faits concrets avec sans opinion.
What is the 7th generation principle?
Qu'est-ce que c'est le principe de la 7e génération?
7th generation principle is a way of thinking and making important decisions in life. This method was used by First Nation people. The concept wanted the current generation of people to make decisions for the benefit of 7 generations ahead of them. Le principe du 7e génération est une manière de faire des décisions avec l'avantage pour les personnes qui vivent en 7e génération.
Who started the 7th generation principle?
Qui commence le principe de la 7e génération?
The Iroquois started the 7th generation principle, and it was known as the Great Law of the Iroquois.
Les Iroquois ont commencé le principe de la 7e génération.
When did the 7th generation principle start?
Quand est-ce que le principe du 7e génération a commencé?
7th generation principle started somewhere between the years 1142 to 1500 AD.
Il termine les années 1600. 1600
Where is the 7th generation principle used?
Où est-ce que le principe de 7e génération est utilisé?
7th generation principle is used in Native Americans and Native Canadian homes today.
Le principe de 7e génération est utilisé dans les maisons des Premières Nations.
Merci.
So, detective's going to be coming on now. Detective finds who, or how, and why. So basically, what they're doing is they're finding all the clues to the bottom of the mystery. Think as if you're a detective. Dun, dun, dun.
ask detective questions.
The detective wants to find out ways and reasons.
Detective questions start with how and why.
Comment ou pourquoi?
Here are some detective questions.
Why do First Nations use 7th-generation thinking?
The First Nations use 7th-generation thinking because they wanted to respect animals, nature. Also, they wanted a healthy and safe environment for a community in 7 generations.
The detective also likes to ask questions that start with how.
Such as,
How did the First Nations use 7th-generation thinking?
Comment est-ce que les Premières Nations utilisent les principaux de cette génération?
Now the detective will answer the question.
Maintenant, le détective répond à la question.
How the First Nations use 7th-generation thinking was before making the decision, they would think how the decision would affect the world in 7 generations.
Comment est-ce que les Premières Nations ont utilisé les principaux de cette génération? Sans au début de faire ces décisions, les Premières Nations pensent cette génération dans le futur.
there's a lot of other questions that the detective can answer.
Which could be,
Why did the Europeans not use 7th-generation thinking?
pourquoi est-ce que les Européens n'ont pas utilisé la pensée de cette génération?
Now the detective will answer the question.
The Europeans didn't use 7th-generation thinking because they were more worried about the present time. They only cared a little bit about the future.
That was the last question.
Thank you for listening. Merci. Robot and detective are just the building blocks of deeper questions. It's not that they're not important, they're just building up to get to these deeper questions. We're going to do judge right now. Judge finds both sides of the story, so it's as if you're in a court. So you're going to be asked questions like, is it fair, is it democratic, is it safe, things like that. But if you're saying is it fair, you're going to be asked why it is fair and why it's not fair. Bye for now.
Order in the court. Hello, I am Judge Chichula. You may call me Your Honor. Today's case is whether or not it is fair to have First Nations make decisions based on the 7th-generation principle. Here is Ms. Stamatakos, a European client. Her lawyer is Ms. Kostopoulos. Here is Mrs. Mitanides, a First Nations client. Her lawyer is Ms. Tidd. The witness for Ms. Stamatakos is Mrs. Chase. The witness for Mrs. Mitanides is Mrs. Zaff. First, I give Ms. Tidd the right to state her opinion. Ms. Tidd, you may talk about why you think it is fair to use this principle.
Your Honor, is it fair? Yes, it is, and here's why. My client's culture believes that taking care of the earth and animals comes first and foremost. Using these principles ensures a healthy and safe environment for the next 7 generations to come. Therefore, I state that it is fair to use the 7th-generation principle.
Thank you, Ms. Tidd. Would your client, Mrs. Mitanides, like to add anything?
Your Honor, I believe that we can decide on our own terms how we make decisions. If you were to go and buy a house, nobody would be telling you how to do that. Therefore, it is fair if we make decisions on our own because that is our choice.
The witness for Mrs. Mitanides, Mrs. Zaff, may take the stand.
Mrs. Zaff, do you think it is fair that the First Nations make decisions for 7 generations to come?
I do think that is fair. First Nations are simply trying to build a better future. Who are we to tell them off for that?
Final question, Mrs. Zaff. If First Nations were not to think about 7 generations to come, what do you think would happen to the world today?
If First Nations did not think about 7 generations to come, we would all be living in a polluted environment. This is because First Nations would not have thought about the animals or the environment, and we would all have a polluted earth. Also, many of the national and provincial parks that we have here today wouldn't have been here.
Ça, c'était la voix des Premières Nations. Maintenant, on va entendre la voix des Européens. Now, Ms. Kostopoulos, the lawyer of Ms. Stamatakos, will talk about why she thinks it is not fair to use this principle.
Your Honor, I believe that it is not fair to use this principle because the future will simply happen in the future. We must always live in the moment and not worry about what's going to happen in 7 generations. The Europeans believe that the people of the future can decide for themselves how to live, and they don't need any guidance from the people in the past. Therefore, it is not fair if the people in 7 generations have all of their future laid out for them and they can't make decisions of their own. Thank you.
Ms. Stamatakos, do you have anything to add to that statement?
Yes, I agree with Ms. Kostopoulos. If the First Nations are so worried about the future, why don't they just live in it?
When people think about the future, it only gets them into more trouble. Therefore, if the First Nations think about the future all the time, they're just putting themselves into danger.
The witness of Miss Tamatacos, Mrs. Chase, may take the stand.
Miss Chase, do you think it is fair for the First Nations to use the 7-generation principle? Personally, I think it isn't fair. Also because of the fact that the First Nations can't make their decisions. For an example, if the First Nations, if anyone today were wanting to live in a polluted environment, they can do that. And if they wanted to live in a good environment, they can also do that for themselves. Therefore, it is more important to make decisions in the present.
Thank you, Ms. Chase. One more question. Why do you think it is better to make decisions for the present and not for the future?
Personally, I think it is better to live in the moment. If a First Nation tribe were to go out and build a house with materials they can find entirely out of nature, in 7 generations, people could not live in that village because the wood would be molding and everything would be falling apart piece by piece.
Well, that was all the information we needed. Thank you, Mrs. Chase. Now the court will vote to decide who should win the case. All in favor for the First Nation side, please raise your hands. Okay, now all in favor for the European side, please raise your hands. Alors, les gagnants de cette case sont les Européens. What? No. Alors, les gagnants de cette case sont les Premières Nations. Case closed.
Great news, I'm back. So, last but definitely not least, we have Inventor. Inventor finds alternatives to everything. So, if you and your friend, or you and someone else, just disagree with something, you're going to find an alternative to that to make both people happy. So, just remember that, alternatives.
Alright. Hello, I am the Inventor, the host of the show, and this is my assistant, Dylan.
Hello.
Our topic today is...
7-generation thinking.
Yay! Okay, so the way this show works is, if you've never seen it, is we find 2 questions on Twitter, answer one here on the show, and one on our Twitter page, so make sure to look at that after. We also are a bilingual show, so if you hear French and English, you're not going crazy. So yeah, let's get on with it.
Okay, guys, show us the questions.
Yay!
Okay. Question number 1 is, how can we find an easy way to make a good decision that will affect the next couple of generations?
Well, we could think for like 9-generation thinking, as if we were moving to another country, like migrating. How would it affect our family for the next 9 generations to come?
Well, Dylan, we did say an easier way, so how about 2nd-generation thinking?
2nd-generation thinking.
Oh, I thought of one. How about 4th generation thinking? For example, if we wanted to start a company, if you wanted to start a company and you would want it to last for 4 generations, you can use 4-generation thinking.
Maintenant en français.
Comment est-ce qu'on peut trouver une façon plus facile de faire une décision qui va affecter les générations à l'avenir?
Tu peux penser 9 générations à l'avenir. Si tu vas migrer à un autre pays, comment est-ce que cette décision va affecter ta famille pour 9 générations à l'avenir?
J'ai dit comment est-ce qu'on peut trouver une façon plus facile, Dylan. Mais j'ai pensé à une alternative. On peut penser 2 générations à l'avenir comme si tu vas acheter une maison qui va durer 2 générations. Comment est-ce que cette décision va affecter ta famille?
Aussi, on peut penser 4 générations à l'avenir. Comme si tu veux commencer une entreprise et tu veux avoir cette entreprise pour 4 générations. Tu dois penser 4 générations à l'avenir.
Ces exemples sont seulement 3 de beaucoup d'autres façons de penser à l'avenir.
Très bien, bravo. Now in English. And to wrap it up, you know one alternative to 7-generation thinking. Any last comments?
Wow, I can't believe that the First Nations do this. I can't even decide what to eat for dinner.
Wow. Oh, well, Billy Bob. Well, that wraps it up. Hope you join us next time. Yay, bye. Thanks for listening.
Now, do we have any questions of any sorts about anything? Yes.
What did you find challenging in your inquiry? Like, what was difficult to do?
We actually learned this stuff on the first day. So we've been taking it in all year. So we've been with it from the first day. That was the day that was mostly the hardest. So we've been trying to keep working on that the entire year, and we have it pretty well now.
That's great.
Yep.
Great job.
Any other questions? Yes.
So when you learn new things or you go somewhere and do you think that way now? Do you think in your 4 questions?
A lot of our classes actually started to think that way. Even just when we're doing research, we've really started to do that. Judge and inventor, robot and detective. So yeah, we've just started thinking okay, what are the facts of this? Why did this start? How did it start? Is this fair? Is it safe? And then if this isn't fair to most people, what's an alternative that we've made to have both people happy? It's just, we've really just started to use that in our daily lives.
Do you like this type of learning? I presume you do. Can you tell me why?
Well, I enjoy this because I find that sometimes the TDSB, with those posters that say level 1 questions, level 2 questions, they're really, all the questions matter. The questions that we're saying are level 1 questions are just building blocks to the better question, or to questions that are more advanced.
So when you say level 1 questions, can you put them in a category? What do you call level 1 questions then?
Well,
Like
now
robot questions?
after this method, there is no level 1 question. They're all becoming higher questions because robot and detective are building blocks of judge and inventor, because judge and inventor need to know all the facts, hows and whys to get.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a particular type of question that you prefer?
No, they're just you really have to go through all of them to get to judge and inventor. If you don't do robot, then how are you supposed to know if it's fair and if it's not fair? You'd have to have reasoning behind that, and you wouldn't be able to know that without the facts.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Did you find that working this way, you created a better community within your classroom and you work well with your classmates?
Yes, because I find now that we're all using the same inquiry, which makes it a lot easier to understand each other and what we're saying. So it's not like one person's doing level 1, 2, 3, and 4 questions, and then other people are doing this method of inquiry, because now we're all doing the same thing, which makes it a lot easier to understand other people.
Right, you're collaborating better.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
If you have an advice to give to a teacher that wants to start an inquiry, what would that be?
I would
Something
just,
you would like us to know about students and inquiry in general.
you just really need to know that all the questions matter and that there are no level 1 questions. Because if you have a question, like you're saying, who started this, it's not like it's a bad question. You're just asking that to find out who started this, to get into deeper questions. So that's one of the big things that a lot of people would need to know to make sure that they're doing this correctly.
So clarifying questions are okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.